Hello and welcome back everyone. In today's video we'll be looking at CSS selectors. Now we've looked at different ways to select elements in CSS using either their element names or class names or IDs. But now we'll be looking at some more advanced things. So the first selector we'll be looking at is the star selector. Now this symbol just selects all elements in your whole page. Does not matter, you don't need to specify what element name it is. It just selects everything. So let's say we want all texts or all elements in our page to have a color of green. When we add that property value to this all selector, all text on our page and all elements become green. So with this you can add some general styling to your page, like you can add the box sizing, border box. So these are some basic things you add when building a production website. So you can add border box, box sizing border box, add the margin of 0, padding of 0. So everything is in its basic form when starting out. So our page will no longer have this margin and padding at the edges. So now that's the star selector. We can mute this for now. Now move over to the next one, which is the element selector. So this is selecting an element based on its element name. In this case we're selecting the h1 tag. So all h1 tags in this page will all have the styling that we have here. Then the next one we have is selecting an element with its element name and class name. So let's say we have paragraph tags in this page and we give it a class name of, let's say, text green. And let's also have another paragraph without that class name of text green. So what we can do here is we first of all select the element name, which is the p tag, then we add that class name to the p tag. And if you look here, we're not leaving any space before, we don't leave any space after the paragraph tag. So you can now add a color of green. So now all paragraph tags with the class name of text green will contain this styling. So when we go back to our page, should get one paragraph green and the other one the default color. So now the next one is how we can select different elements to add one styling at once. So let's say we have a paragraph tag. Let's put some text. So this is a paragraph of text. Then we can now have a span tag and say this is a span of text. So we'll just do Ctrl B to close the sidebar, and we can just add one more, like h1, and say this is a heading. Now let's say we want each of these elements to have a common styling of, let's say, color. What we can do is we can select each one of them at the same time. So to do that, you put in either the class name or element name, or however you're selecting them. So in this case we're selecting with the element name, so h1, then you add a comma, then the paragraph tag and the span tag. Then the last element you're selecting, you don't add a comma after that. So now to style this, I can now give all of them a common styling of color red, instead of having to do h1 red, paragraph red, span red. So this just reduces the amount of CSS code you have to write. And that's all we have here. Then The next kind of selector we'll be looking at is the selecting of children elements. So let's create, okay, we already have a div here. Let's unmute this. Okay, so now we have a div of text here. Let's see how it looks in our page. So this is, let's just get rid of the styling for all this plus of text. One can just get rid of all this. And so this is what we have right now. Let's also revert the colors back and mute all this. So now we have this, and let's say in this app div we have paragraph tags containing our text, and let's say we want all paragraph tags in this specific div that has the class name of text to be bold, to be both bold and italic. So to do that, you can just select the class name of the text, but now to be more specific, we can add the div after it. So only divs that have the class name of text will receive this styling. So now to select all paragraph tags inside this div, you now type in the element's name, and remember to leave a space. Then we add the p tag, and now what this just essentially does is select all paragraph tags inside this div. So now we can add a font width of bold and font style of italic. So now all paragraphs in our div are now bold and italic. Okay, so now this next selector we'll be looking at is selecting the first element that comes after a particular element. So now let's say we have this our div here, and what's the next element we have? It's a header tag. So let's add a second heading. So put this is second heading, and let's see our results. So let's get rid of this border around our heading. Okay, so now we have our two headings. Now let's say we want to select the next h1 tag that comes after this div, which is its sibling element. To do that, we'll select this div, the div with the class name of text, and add a plus symbol with a h1 after it. So if you hover over the selector, you can get an idea of what this does. So this is the div element. Any other h1 tag immediately after this div element will now be selected. So we can give this a styling of, let's say, font size of 120 pixels. So now when we go back, you can see that now this h1 tag is of 120 pixels. But now if for any reason the next element after this div is not a h1 tag, this styling will now be invalid and not work on our page. So yeah, that's it. So now we've looked at selecting any element that comes immediately after this, but let's say we want to now select every element, every h1 element that comes after this div tag. How can we do that? Now to do that, we just need to change this plus symbol to a tilde symbol. Now you can locate that tilde symbol when clicking shift and your backtick symbol, which is mostly located next to 1 on your keyboard. So now every h1 tag that comes after this div will now get the styling of font size 120 pixels. So now let's check that out, and you can see this second h1 tag got that styling. But now if we move this around and take these h1 tags before the div, that styling no longer applies. So that's some basic CSS selectors and how you can just select elements on your page. Now let's move into selecting elements with attributes. Now let's select. Now first of all, let's make sure we know what attributes are. So now attributes are all these things that you can add to your elements to either change the way they look or change their behavior, so such as class, and for things like inputs of the type checkbox, you can also add attributes of checked, and so on. So just all these things like the type is an attribute, name is an attribute, ID is an attribute, class is an attribute, and so forth. So now if you want to select elements with these attributes, now let's start from class. Now you won't use this method since this is already built into CSS using the dot, but let's say you just want to select this, you want to select a class name using the attribute method. You first of all put in your elements, then square brackets, then you can now type in the attributes. So in this case class, and I can say class equals to text green. So I can now put this and say color. Now to just change this to show that this works, color red. Let's mute this and go back now. So every paragraph tag in our page with the class name of text green will be color red. So let's go back to our CSS page, and now this is our paragraph, and this is what we have. The paragraph was selected successfully and the color was changed to red. Now we can select elements. Let's say our paragraph had, let's just make up an attribute. Now to make up attributes in HTML, you most times just use the data. So you use data followed by whatever you want your attribute name to be. So I can say data color. So let's copy these attributes, and so if you go back, you can see that the paragraph is now just like every other one. Now I don't need to worry too much about how this works or what this means. We'll be looking more at this when we get to JavaScript, but for now just know you can make your own custom attributes. So data color is an attribute on this paragraph, so I can select that and say all paragraphs with the attribute of data color that is equal to text green should be red. Okay, let's change this color to something else. Let's say purple. Now when we go back, you can see our text is now purple. So let's just make this correspond and so on. So now we've looked at with text. Now how about with images? Now let's add an image, and let's see which images we have here. So we have the about us image, so we can just load that in. About us, the JPG, and go back, and this is the image we have now. And now let's say we just want to style this image but not using a class name or the image tag directly. So I can say data. So the same way we created an attribute in the last element, you can say data image. So you can call this whatever you want. I can call this data image, then the value can be about us image. So I can select this attribute with the value and come here and say all images with the attribute data image that is equal to about us image. Give it a styling of width 500 pixels, height 500 pixels, and let's say a border radius of 10 pixels. So as you can see, the image has been styled using the attributes set on it. Now remember, if I've not said this, you can also style elements using their attributes without the value. So let's just say we want to style all paragraphs that have the attribute of data color. So let's just say this, all paragraphs that have the attribute of data color. Now in this example, we're not adding a value, so we just want to select all that have this. We want to give them a default color of, let's say, let's choose a random color, take crimson. Now when we come here, if we copy this attribute without the value and add it to this, and let's say this also, now you can see we didn't add a value to this, so it's not necessary. You can add a value or not. So now when we go back, you can see those paragraphs that we added that data color property to got the styling that was added. So you can style using the attribute name and value, or just the attribute name. So that's where we'll be stopping for today. We've seen how we can select elements and their siblings, their children, and so on. And we've seen how we can select elements using attributes and so on. In the next video, we'll be looking at CSS, pseudo classes, and pseudo elements, and how we can change the behavior and look of some default things in HTML, such as the color that we have when we click a link. So let's create a link here and just call it link. So let's link it to a page we haven't visited, and so let's say anything like test.html. so that's the file that we have, so it should be a page we haven't visited. So now if you notice, since we haven't visited this page, it's showing the link as blue, but once you click this link and go back and refresh, okay, let's create that file quickly. So just test.html, then a simple HTML template, test page. So when we go back, refresh, click the link and go back, you see that that link color now has changed from blue to purple, and that's because that link has already been visited. So in the next video, we'll be looking at how we can change the color that is shown when a link has been visited and so on. So see you in that video, and bye for now.